Economics is a social science that studies the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Economics focuses on the behavior and interactions of economic agents and how economies work. Microeconomics analyses what is viewed as basic elements within economies, including individual agents and markets, their interactions, and the outcomes of interactions. Individual agents may include, for example, households, firms, buyers, and sellers. Macroeconomics analyses economies as systems where production, distribution, consumption, savings, and investment expenditure interact, and the factors of production affecting them, such as labor, capital, land, and enterprise, inflation, economic growth, and public policies that impact these elements. It also seeks to analyze and describe the global economy. Other broad distinctions within economics include those between positive economics, describing what is, and normative economics, advocating what ought to be, between economic theory and applied economics, between rational and behavioral economics, and between mainstream economics and heterodox economics. Economic analysis can be applied throughout society, including business, finance, cybersecurity, healthcare, engineering, and government. It is also applied to such diverse subjects as crime, education, the family, feminism, law, philosophy, politics, religion, social institutions, war, science, and the environment. There are a variety of modern definitions of economics, some reflect evolving views of the subject or different views among economists. Scottish philosopher Adam Smith, 1776, defined what was then called political economy as an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, in particular as a branch of the science of a statesman or legislator with the twofold objectives of providing a plentiful revenue or subsistence for the people, and to supply the state or commonwealth with the revenue for the public services. John Baptiste Say, 1803, distinguishing the subject matter from its public policy uses, defined it as the science of production, distribution, and consumption of wealth. On the satirical side, Thomas Carlyle, 1849, coined the dismal science as an epithet for classical economics, in this context, commonly linked to the pessimistic analysis of Malthus, 1798. John Stuart Mill, 1844, delimited the subject matter further. The science which traces the laws of such of the phenomena of society as arise from the combined operations of mankind for the production of wealth, in so far as those phenomena are not modified by the pursuit of any other object. Alfred Marshall provided a still widely cited definition in his textbook Principles of Economics, 1890, that extended analysis beyond wealth and from the societal to the microeconomic level. Economics is a study of man in the ordinary business of life. It inquires how he gets his income and how he uses it. Thus, it is on the one side, the study of wealth, and on the other and more important side, a part of the study of man. Lionel Robbins, 1932, developed implications of what has been termed perhaps the most commonly accepted current definition of the subject. Economics is the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. Robbins described the definition as not classificatory in picking out certain kinds of behavior but rather analytical in focusing attention on a particular aspect of behavior, the form imposed by the influence of scarcity. He affirmed that previous economists have usually centered their studies on the analysis of wealth, how wealth is created, production, distributed, and consumed, and how wealth can grow. But he said that economics can be used to study other things, such as war, that are outside its usual focus. This is because war has as the goal winning it, as a sought-after end, generates both cost and benefits, and resources, human life and other costs, are used to attain the goal. If the war is not winnable or if the expected costs outweigh the benefits, the deciding actors, assuming they are rational, may never go to war, a decision, but rather explore other alternatives. Economics cannot be defined as the science that studies wealth, war, crime, education, and any other field economic analysis can be applied to, but, as the science that studies a particular common aspect of each of those subjects, they all use scarce resources to attain a sought-after end. Some subsequent comments criticized the definition as overly broad in failing to limit its subject matter to analysis of markets. From the 1960s, however, such comments abetted as the economic theory of maximizing behavior and rational choice modeling expanded the domain of the subject to areas previously treated in other fields. There are other criticisms as well, such as in scarcity not accounting for the macroeconomics of high unemployment. Gary Becker, a contributor to the expansion of economics into new areas, described the approach he favored as combining the assumptions of maximizing behavior, stable preferences, and market equilibrium, used relentlessly and unflinchingly. One commentary characterizes the remark as making economics an approach rather than a subject matter, but with great specificity as to the choice process and the type of social interaction that such analysis involves. The same source reviews a range of definitions included in Principles of Economics textbooks and concludes that the lack of agreement need not affect the subject matter that the texts treat. Among economists more generally, it argues that a particular definition presented may reflect the direction toward which the author believes economics is evolving, or should evolve. Many economists, including Nobel Prize winners James M. Buchanan and Ronald Coase, reject the method-based definition of Robbins and continue to prefer definitions like those of Say, in terms of its subject matter. Ha-Joon Chang has, for example, argued that the definition of Robbins would make economics very peculiar because all other sciences define themselves in terms of the area of inquiry or object of inquiry rather than the methodology. In the biology department, it is not said that all biology should be studied with DNA analysis. People study living organisms in many different ways, so some people will perform DNA analysis, others might analyze anatomy, and still others might build game-theoretic models of animal behavior. But they are all called biology because they all study living organisms. According to Ha-Joon Chang, this view that the economy can and should be studied in only one way, for example by studying only rational choices, and going even one step further and basically redefining economics as a theory of everything, is peculiar. Other schools or trends of thought referring to a particular style of economics practiced at and disseminated from well-defined groups of academicians that have become known worldwide, include the Freiburg School, the School of Lausanne, the Stockholm School and the Chicago School of Economics. During the 1970s and 1980s, mainstream economics was sometimes separated into the saltwater approach of those universities along the eastern and western coasts of the U.S., and the freshwater, or Chicago School approach. Within macroeconomics there is, in general order of their historical appearance in the literature, classical economics, neoclassical economics, Keynesian economics, the neoclassical synthesis, Monetarism, New Classical Economics, New Keynesian Economics and the New Neoclassical Synthesis. Beside the mainstream development of economic thought, various alternative or heterodox economic theories have evolved over time, positioning themselves in contrast to mainstream theory. These include Austrian School, emphasizing human action, property rights, and the freedom to contract and transact to have a thriving and successful economy. It also emphasizes that the state should play as small role as possible, if any role, in the regulation of economic activity between two transacting parties. Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises are the two most prominent representatives of the Austrian school. Post-Keynesian economics concentrates on macroeconomic rigidities and adjustment processes. It is generally associated with the University of Cambridge and the work of Joan Robinson. Ecological economics, like environmental economics, studies the interactions between human economies and the ecosystems in which they are embedded, but in contrast to environmental economics takes an oppositional position towards general mainstream economic principles. A major difference between the two subdisciplines is their assumptions about the substitution possibilities between human-made and natural capital. Additionally, alternative developments include Marxian economics, constitutional economics, institutional economics, evolutionary economics, dependency theory, structuralist economics, world systems theory, econophysics, econodynamics, feminist economics, and biophysical economics. Feminist economics emphasizes the role that gender plays in economies, challenging analyses that render gender invisible or support gender-oppressive economic systems. The goal is to create economic research and policy analysis that is inclusive and gender-aware to encourage gender equality and improve the well-being of marginalized groups. Mainstream economic theory relies upon analytical economic models. When creating theories, the objective is to find assumptions which are at least as simple in information requirements, more precise in predictions, and more fruitful in generating additional research than prior theories. While neoclassical economic theory constitutes both the dominant or orthodox theoretical as well as methodological framework, economic theory can also take the form of other schools of thought such as in heterodox economic theories. In microeconomics, principal concepts include supply and demand, marginalism, rational choice theory, opportunity cost, budget constraints, utility, and the theory of the firm. Early macroeconomic models focused on modeling the relationships between aggregate variables, but as the relationships appeared to change over time, macroeconomists, including New Keynesians, reformulated their models with micro-foundations, in which microeconomic concepts play a major part. Sometimes an economic hypothesis is only qualitative, not quantitative. Expositions of economic reasoning often use two-dimensional graphs to illustrate theoretical relationships. At a higher level of generality, mathematical economics is the application of mathematical methods to represent theories and analyze problems in economics. Paul Samuelson's treatise Foundations of Economic Analysis, 1947, exemplifies the method, particularly as to maximizing behavioral relations of agents reaching equilibrium. The book focused on examining the class of statements called operationally meaningful theorems in economics, which are theorems that can conceivably be refuted by empirical data. Economic theories are frequently tested empirically, largely through the use of econometrics using economic data. The controlled experiments common to the physical sciences are difficult and uncommon in economics, and instead broad data is observationally studied. This type of testing is typically regarded as less rigorous than controlled experimentation, and the conclusions typically more tentative. However, the field of experimental economics is growing, and increasing use is being made of natural experiments. Statistical methods such as regression analysis are common. Practitioners use such methods to estimate the size, economic significance, and statistical significance, signal strength, of the hypothesis relation, S, and to adjust for noise from other variables. By such means, a hypothesis may gain acceptance, although in a probabilistic, rather than certain, sense. Acceptance is dependent upon the falsifiable hypothesis surviving tests. Use of commonly accepted methods need not produce a final conclusion or even a consensus on a particular question, given different tests, data sets, and prior beliefs. Experimental economics has promoted the use of scientifically controlled experiments. This has reduced the long-noted distinction of economics from natural sciences because it allows direct tests of what were previously taken as axioms. In some cases, these have found that the axioms are not entirely correct. In behavioral economics, psychologist Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002 for his and Amos Tversky's empirical discovery of several cognitive biases and heuristics. Similar empirical testing occurs in neuroeconomics. Another example is the assumption of narrowly selfish preferences versus a model that tests for selfish, altruistic, and cooperative preferences. These techniques have led some to argue that economics is a genuine science. An economist is a professional and practitioner in the social science discipline of economics. The individual may also study, develop, and apply theories and concepts from economics and write about economic policy. Within this field there are many subfields, ranging from the broad philosophical theories to the focused study of minutiae within specific markets, macroeconomic analysis, microeconomic analysis, or financial statement analysis. involving analytical methods and tools such as econometrics, statistics, economics computational models, financial economics, regulatory impact analysis and mathematical economics. Economists work in many fields including academia, government, and in the private sector, where they may also study data and statistics in order to spot trends in economic activity, economic confidence levels, and consumer attitudes. They assess this information using advanced methods in statistical analysis, mathematics, computer programming, and they make recommendations about ways to improve the efficiency of a system or take advantage of trends as they begin. In addition to government and academia, economists are also employed in banking, finance, accountancy, commerce, marketing, business administration, lobbying, and non- or not-for-profit organizations. In many organizations, an economic analyst is a formalized role. Professionals here are employed, or engaged as consultants, to conduct research, prepare reports, or formulate plans and strategies to address economic problems. Here, as outlined, the analyst provides forecasts, analysis, and advice, based upon observed trends and economic principles. This entails also collecting and processing economic and statistical data using econometric methods and statistical techniques. Economic analysts employed in financial institutions and in other large corporates provide the long-term economic forecasts used within their organizations. Relatedly, they consult to fund managers, risk managers, and corporate analysts re their investment strategy/capital budgeting decisions. Particularly in the tech sector, the focus may be microeconomic, addressing pricing, competition, and customer behavior. Re either perspective, chief economists are also often included in strategy formulation. In the public sector, analysts advise legislators and executives on economic policy, public works, and related. Politicians often consult economists before enacting economic policy, and many statesmen have academic degrees in economics. A federal government economic analyst conducts economic analysis of issues directly related to the function of their federal government agency. In contrast to regulated professions such as engineering, law, or medicine, there is not a legally required educational requirement or license for economists. In academia, most economists have a PhD degree in economics. In the U.S. government, on the other hand, a person can be hired as an economist provided that they have a degree that included or was supplemented by 21 semester hours in economics and 3 hours in statistics, accounting, or calculus. In fact, a professional working inside of one of many fields of economics or having an academic degree in this subject is often considered to be an economist. See Bachelor of Economics and Master of Economics. Thank you for watching this video.